This is One on One. Jerry Capeci is with us. He's a reporter, columnist, author. He is the founder of ganglandnews.com. Go check it out. Everything you ever wanted, needed to know about organized crime. He is the country, in my opinion, foremost expert on the mob, organized crime. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Steve.
You wrote for the Daily News on this subject for how many years?
I was at the News for about 13 years. I had the column there, Gangland, for about 5 or 6 years.
And let's, by the way, let's plug some of your books before we get into some characters.
Sounds good to me.
Bob Morris, our director. Let's put the book up and Jerry can say what it is. Let's go to the first one. Idiot's Guide, right?
Yeah, The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Mafia. It's not a history of the mob. It's anything and everything you didn't think to ask, or you might have asked or wanted to ask about the mob, where it comes from, what it's all about, how they make money, and some of the silly, stupid things that they do. You know.
Got it. What's next?
Gangland, that's the first 15 years or so of my columns. Started in the Daily News in 88, 89. They ran for about 5 or 6 years then. And since then, it's been online. And so it's a combination of stuff that was in the Daily News, stuff that was online, and also a couple of columns that made the New York Sun, which also ran my column for a couple of years.
Mob Star.
Mob Star, the 2002 edition. That's the second edition of Mob Star. It's basically the complete saga of John Gotti. It came out a couple of days after he passed away, as a matter of fact, in 2002. Everything from his original acquittal to his ultimate conviction and his death in prison.
Murder Machine.
Murder Machine. This is the book about the scariest bunch of serial gangster killers ever, the people that Gene Mustaine and I found out about while we were writing a book about John Gotti.
Roy DeMeo in there?
Roy DeMeo was the guy in there, and exactly how we got onto that story was we were listening to a tape-recorded conversation between Gene Gotti and Angelo Ruggiero, and they were talking about John.
Quack. Angelo,
Quack,
right?
yeah,
Okay.
that's the guy. And they were talking about John Gotti not wanting to whack Roy DeMeo because he had an army. And we said, who is this guy that John Gotti's afraid of? And that's what.
And finally?
And Gotti Rise and Fall is the book that we did in 1995, 1996. It's basically the story of Gotti and his conviction and the beginning of his life sentence in prison.
This is one of these interviews that I've been wanting to do for a long time and track you down. You're hard to find. Because I have a lot of questions for you. John Gotti, all these years later, why are we even interested in him? Still interested. It's not just me.
Well,
I'm curious about this guy.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I think he was the Dapper Don. And the key thing that created him or made him into a, quote, folk hero, public enemy number one is he beat the case. He was the first and really, I think the only still mafia boss to beat a racketeering conviction.
Now, jury tampering does help, Hope.
It does help when you got the jury fixed. That's why at some point we did manage to call him the bogus boss.
Yes.
Because of that. But it does help to have the jury on your side. Yes. And one of the reasons why his name is still out there is his son took over the crime family, was an acting boss, was prosecuted 4 times for various,
And now
activity.
today, young Mr. Gotti is?
He is a free and clear individual. He beat the case 4 times in a row. Not an acquittal, but good enough for him. He got a hung jury 4 times in a row. There is always something still going on around the Gambino crime family. 2011, they had this big Mafia takedown day, 127 guys, and they arrested a guy who was a Gambino soldier who was involved in a murder double murder back in the 1980s, 1981, double homicide. So he goes to trial in 2013, and the Gotti name is out there again. It's John Gotti. He was only the boss of the family for about 5 years, but he had an amazing impact on the Gambino crime family and the mob itself.
Jerry, what I'm often curious about is today, in 2013, as we do this show, after the RICO statutes have been in place for all these years, after it appears that the 5 families, as they were originally constituted, have been busted up by the feds. It's been such a priority after Hoover was gone, right? And the federal government took it seriously. it appears on the surface, for those who are not experts in the subject, like myself, but are curious, that it's not only not what organized crime was, but disorganized, not together, not that many of them anymore, and not that influential. Are we naive and wrong about that?
No, I think you hit all the hot spots and the main points. It is still an organized crime. It's still 5 crime families. They're not as organized as they once were. They don't have as much clout as they used to, especially in the big money-making activities that kept them going, which is the labor racketeering, the control of legitimate businesses, the private sanitation industry, the trucking industry, the construction industry. Their clout and impact in those areas has been reduced substantially. There are still gangsters who are involved in that kind of stuff, and they're always looking it's a cat and mouse game. So, you go after them in this area and they'll try to do something else. The mob is still out there, though. I mean, they still have 5 crime families. The bosses now are a lot less showy. They don't walk around Broadway anymore, or Little Italy, saying, come on out and look at me, here I am, like John Gotti did. They have a lot more difficulty running their crime families. Another thing that's made them less effective is the bosses of the crime families still trying to maintain control while they're in prison 1,000 miles away. Makes it a little easier to get for them to go off and go astray.
I'm curious, after all the years of writing about the mob, organized crime, the mafia, that some who are Italian-American don't even like you to use that word, which I find interesting. Being Italian-American yourself, I've always been curious about this. Did you ever feel threatened yourself that you were in a tough spot because you wrote so honestly, directly, and candidly about these guys?
Well, I wouldn't meet people in dark alleys. I mean, common sense does prevail. I've never really been threatened by anyone with a name. And everybody in the business, yourself included, I'm sure, gets anonymous, silly phone calls. But I've never been threatened, so to speak, for anything that I did or was about to do. I mean, when you went into the courtroom in the John Gotti days, and this is in the early 80s before they had detention became a big thing, and they put people in jail awaiting trial. They would sit in the courtroom, and they were big guys, and they would look at you and let you know that they were not happy that you were there. But they never actually threatened you in any way, shape, or form, at least with me. I mean, I did have a shouting match with Gene Gotti at one point. Basically, it was
John Gotti's brother, Gene.
Gene Gotti, right. Basically, it wasn't really a shouting match. He was doing the shouting, and I was saying, I'm sorry you feel that way, Gene. I really tried. It was right after the first book came out, and I said, look, we wrote that he was acquitted. This was after that 1987 acquittal. We did write that he was acquitted. So I really haven't had too many difficulties with them. They kind of treat me as a necessary evil.
Not our, but for many, the romance, the way that many have looked at the mob and tried to, all the way back to Al Capone, maybe not even before. I'm reading a book about Capone right now. That many have tried to look at these guys as, come on, they wouldn't hurt regular people, regular citizens, and they weren't involved in stuff that would really hurt people. A lot of these guys were thugs. A lot of these guys did hurt regular people. They hurt regular businesses because if they're saying to a regular business, if you don't pay us, then you're going to have a problem. I mean, that's hurting a business. That whole fantasy in our heads that they're only going to hurt each other and they're only doing business with each other, that just wasn't true.
Definitely not. I mean, that's the Godfather mentality. The Godfather basically glorified the mob. I think a more realistic.
Does The Sopranos make it more real?
Definitely. And I think before that, the movie that made it more real was Goodfellas. I mean, here you had guys that killed people just because they didn't like the way you looked. And there was no crime too big. They had $6 million from Kennedy Airport.
That's
no
right.
crime too small. They were stealing quarters out of
from
parking
Lufthansa
meters.
deal
Parking
to
meters.
right.
Parking meters.
Always looking for a buck.
Oh, no matter what it is. And they kill people just, for no reason. So that's the real, I guess, the way the mob was portrayed accurately on the big screen was Goodfellas. And Sopranos was a good,
You like The
did a good job
Sopranos?
too. I thought it was a pretty good show. Yes, I thought it was a good show. I did not take the position, and do not take the position, that it was an anti-Italian show. Or,
Did not.
I take the position it was a show about gangsters. It was a show about Italian American gangsters. It's a small percentage of criminal people out there, but they do exist. And I think Chase and his crew did a good job of putting it on the screen and making it believable. What they did, which was interesting.
2 seconds, go ahead.
Was that they made Tony Soprano, they gave him some redeeming values that made you feel like a lot of times rooting for him against the other gangsters and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, only part of that's true. Jerry, I want to thank you for joining us. We encourage everyone to go on your website to find out more, and I appreciate you coming in and sharing.
It's been fun, Steve. Thank you.
Wish you nothing but the best.
Thanks again, and to you too.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating 25 years of broadcast excellence in partnership with St. Joseph's Healthcare System. Funding has been provided by Barnabas Health, TD Bank, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, PSE&G, New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group, Roche, the law firm of GIBBONS PC, and by the New Jersey Education Association. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been made possible in part by New Jersey State Nurses Association.